Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Hug. Today I am doing an unhaul of some of the books that I read in 2018. So in 2018, even though I did some unhaul videos, I didn't unhaul any of the books that I had read in that year, and so I am doing that now. I wanted to hang on to them so that at the end of the year I would have them, so I could like look back at the books that I had read and kind of make my decisions about what to unhaul at the end of the year after I had finished reading everything for that year. So now, since we're in 2019, I am ready to unhaul some of those 2018 reads that either were disappointing or that I really hated or that I just think I'm never going to read again. The first few books that I have to unhaul are ones that were all in my most disappointing books from 2018 video, so they won't really be a surprise, and I'm gonna go through them pretty quickly because I did that whole video about why I was unhauling them. So if you want more detail about why I disliked these books, why I'm getting rid of them, I'll link that video down below, but let's just get started. The first book that I have is The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This is a classic sci-fi that was published in the 1950s. I was reading it for my science fiction through the decades, and this one I just wasn't a fan of. I thought it was really boring and I couldn't get into it. The next one that I have is Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein. This is another one that was for the same challenge. This was the 60s book, and I also I couldn't get into it. I understood the point that it was trying to make, but I wasn't really that impressed by it. I didn't like the writing. Also, the book has a lot of, it was written in the 60s, and you can really tell both in the style of writing and also in the sexist and racist stuff that it says. So I don't need to hang on to this one. Then I have The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and this is one that I had been considering maybe continuing the series and then just finally decided that I finished the whole book, but I'm DNFing the series. I'm not going to continue it. I was really not impressed. I didn't think that the story was very interesting. I thought the main character was very two-dimensional and boring and really annoying, and I understand that people always say he's an unreliable narrator, and that's true, but it still doesn't, knowing that he's an unreliable narrator doesn't make the story any more interesting to me. The next book that I have is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. This is a YA contemporary fantasy in which fairy tales may not be so mythical, they may actually be real and coming to life. And this is one that I thought sounded really interesting because it has a lot of dark fairy tale vibes to it, which I thought sounded really interesting. But for me, it really couldn't deliver. I hated the main character. I thought the pacing was really bizarre, and it wasn't nearly as fantastical as I wanted it to be. There were just a lot of issues to it for me, so I'm gonna let this one go. The next book that I have is Sisters of the Winterwood by Rena Rossner. This is one that was disappointing because I had very high expectations for it. It is a fairy tale retelling of the Goblin Market that is set in the Ukraine in a Jewish shtetl, and this one, yeah, I had very high expectations and it really did not meet those expectations. I also didn't really love the way some of the characterization of the Jewish characters were done. And if I have my review for this out already, I will link it below. If not, it'll be coming soon. And then I have Crown Duel by Sherwood Smith, and this is one I actually didn't really talk about in the video about my most disappointing reads. I just mentioned that I DNF'd this book, and I had read another book by Sherwood Smith a couple of years ago that I really enjoyed, so I had wanted to try something else by her, and this one just couldn't keep my attention. I don't even really remember why I DNF'd it. I think I just kept forgetting that I was even reading it, and eventually I was I'm just so not invested, I'm never going to finish it. So I don't think it had anything that was specifically wrong with it. I just couldn't keep my attention. Now we're moving on to some books that were not in my most disappointing reads, but I do not feel the need to keep them, or I don't think I'm going to read them again. Some of these aren't necessarily bad or disappointing, I just don't need to hold on to them. The first one is Invitation to Meditation by Howard Cohn, and hopefully you can see the cover because it is very light. But this one I think is a very nice little introduction to meditation as a book. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't think that I need to hang on to it. Maybe I'll find somebody who wants something that's just a little intro to meditation, or I'll donate it and maybe someone is looking for just this kind of thing. Then I have Big Magic: Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert, and this is about creativity and kind of her thoughts on how creativity works and how we should interact with our creativity and how we should use creativity and live creative lives and all of that. And this one I thought was It was interesting. I think she had a mix of some interesting ideas and then some that were really some of the ideas seemed very unfounded or very irrelevant, or some of her ideas also seem like things that would only be applicable if you are coming from a very privileged background. So yeah, I think there are a couple things, there are a couple like quotes I might save from this, but I don't feel like I need the whole book. And then I have two poetry books. The first is Love and Misadventure by Lang Leave, and the other is Flux by Orion Carlotto. And both of these are, like, I have them together just because they are kind of similar in my mind. I've been trying to read more poetry and figure out what kind of poetry I like. And these are ones that I don't think that these are bad poetry, but they're not what I'm looking for. They're both in a more modern style. They have very short poems, and they both have illustrations in them, but very different like styles of illustration. But also they are both very short, sad love poems. And I have found that I think the more modern style of poetry is not really my thing, but also the really like short, sad love poems, it's just not really what I'm looking for out of poetry. So again, not that these are like, I don't think these are bad poetry, but these really are not the kind of poetry that I want or what I'm looking for. So let somebody else enjoy them. Then I have To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This was her debut novel that just came out in 2018. And it is kind of a Little Mermaid retelling, I guess. It has like sirens in it. And this one, part of like reading this, I realized that I don't like mermaids or like under the sea settings. And this is one of the things that like really drove that point home for me, that I was like, oh yeah, I don't like this setting at all. But also one of my issues with it was that I think she had a really strong start to the book, but I don't think that she was able to maintain tension throughout the book. So there were lots of points that were supposed to be like a climax to the story where it, like, the story just didn't have any emotional tension or plot tension to it. So I really was not engaged and I didn't really care about what was happening. This one, I think it just didn't deliver in the way that I was hoping for, even though it had a really strong start. Then I have a whole trilogy that I am letting go, which I don't even know if this trilogy has a name, but the first book is The Witches of Lichford, the second is The Lost Child of Lichford, and the third is A Long Day in Lichford, all by Paul Cornell. And so these are just a whole series of novellas that follow three witches who live in modern day England, I think, in a small town. And they are kind of, their town is on the border between our world and a magical like spirit or fairy world. And they have to kind of fight to maintain that border so that malevolent creatures don't come into our world. And this one, again, this is another one, I didn't necessarily think it was bad. It wasn't really what I was looking for. It was less fantastical than I was hoping for. It was like, there was less magic in it than what I wanted. And it wasn't as atmospheric as I was hoping for. I did really love one of the main characters. Her name is Judith, I think. She is an older woman who lives in the town who kind of hates everybody, and she's very like grouchy, but she also is like, I hate all of you, but I'm not gonna let you die. And I just like, I enjoy that kind of character. So I did really like her. And these ones I may actually see if my mom wants them, because she read all of them and really enjoyed them, so I don't know if she's gonna want to hang on to them. But they just like, they weren't quite what I was looking for, and I don't really feel like I need to hang on to them. And the last book that I have is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, and this is one definitely that I don't think that this is a bad book. I think I gave it like 4 stars when I read it. I think it is very well done. I think that the mix of the story is really well done. The mixture of that and the illustrations that are in it gives it a really interesting feel when you read it. I just don't think I'm ever going to read this again. So this is one that, yeah, I think it was very well done. I just don't think I'm gonna ever read it, so I'm gonna let it go. So those are all the books that I'm unhauling from 2018. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.